the foods that are meant to be high in saturated fats, i.e. red meat, less than 2% of that product is actually saturated fats.
Olive oil does not belong in human diets.
So look, olive oil, until recently, they never tested. They just assumed that there was no vitamin C in animal proteins. It opens its doors and says, come in, you're welcome. And it crams in these damaged LDL particles, and this macrophage will grow into a foam cell, and the foam cell becomes an atherosclerotic plaque.
Fruits and vegetables contain antioxidants.
False. And the reason for this, we believe that fruits and vegetables contain antioxidants because they elicit an activation of glutathione, which is the body's master antioxidant. But it does this via a pathway called the NRF2 pathway. Now, what happens from fruits and vegetables is this glutathione will rise, which is what scientists are seeing, and this is why they believe that it's an antioxidant response. But then glutathione will drop incredibly quickly and remain and end up below baseline. Now, this isn't a true hormetic response. Other things that activate this NRF2 pathway are things like lead, mercury, arsenic, tobacco smoke, cyanide. And a quick Google search will show you this. These compounds elicit the same pathway as your fruits and vegetables elicit. You cannot argue one is beneficial when the other is clearly not beneficial. All we need to do is lower our fruits and vegetables, compounds that are high in carbohydrate, we become ketogenic. When we increase ketones within the body, particularly via beta-hydroxybutyrate, this has an antioxidant effect on glutathione. Glutathione will become elevated. So if you want a true hormetic response, we can elicit this via a ketogenic lifestyle. It does not come via fruits and vegetables. And just to circle back really quickly, this activation of the NRF2 pathway, it can be beneficial in the short term, which is how medications work. It's there to address a problem in that time and space. But what we need to do is look at the root cause. That medication doesn't address the root cause. So when we consume said vegetable, said fruit, it elicits this response via that NRF2 pathway. Overexpression of this pathway will elicit the activation of another pathway called NFKB, nuclear factor kappa B. Nuclear factor kappa B increase inflammatory cytokines and interleukins, which cause havoc within the body. All you need to do is search NFKB, and you will see that the arms that come off the pathway, that come off this pathway, all elicit this inflammatory response. And this comes via the NRF2 pathway, which comes from your fruits and vegetables. So fruits and vegetables are not antioxidants. They are pro-oxidants.
We need to limit the amount of animal proteins in our diet for optimal kidney function.
Again, false. Protein builds, and this is how we heal and repair the body via something called protein synthesis. And this comes from the DNA. When we consume animal proteins are broken down into amino acids, and the body will then take photocopies of our DNA. In simple terms, they'll send this photocopy to the ribosome, where the ribosome will read the codons on the DNA. So these little nucleotides, which come in packs of 3, collectively they're called codons. They signal the attraction of a certain amino acid, and then the next one to another amino acid, and so on and so forth. And this will build a chain called a peptide, which will eventually become a protein. This protein then goes on to heal and build every single cell in your bodies, whether it's nerve cells, brain, eyes, heart, liver, kidney, so on and so forth. And you can see where I'm going with this. Every time we consume animal proteins, we break them down into amino acids and reconstitute them into human proteins. This process occurs countless amounts of times throughout the day, and without it, we would not be alive. We cannot live without dietary protein, and there is not one paper that conclusively shows that protein consumption damages the kidneys. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. I've recently worked with someone who suffered with advanced polycystic kidney disease, which is meant to be degenerative. This person came to see me roughly 2 years ago. We put them on a carnivore-based lifestyle, high protein, and now this advanced polycystic kidney disease has stopped dead in its tracks, and kidney function has actually increased. How can this possibly be if protein is damaged into the body? Protein heals and repairs every cell in the body, in particular, and including the kidneys.
Turmeric helps detoxify the body.
I love it. False. And again, coming back to the point that we just made, turmeric is a pro-oxidant. It's not an antioxidant. Now, think back to when someone has told us to consume turmeric as an antioxidant. They also tell us to consume it with black pepper. And the reason is that it's meant to increase the absorption within the body. And this isn't entirely true. What it actually does, the piperine in the black pepper actually blocks phase 2 detoxification in the liver by blocking an enzyme called UDP glucuronosyl transferase. Now, what happens is we consume a toxin, i.e. turmeric. The liver tries to remove it from the body. Why is your body trying to remove a compound that is meant to be beneficial? It's removing this compound because it's detrimental to the body. Adding in this black pepper and piperine and blocking this enzyme doesn't increase the absorption. It prevents your body from detoxing a toxin. It's preventing the liver from carrying out phase 2 detoxification. When we consume this compound and we see this elicitation and elevation of glutathione, it's short-lived. The reason that it's being elevated comes back to this phase 2 detoxification or glucuronidation, is to remove it from your body, not to absorb it for an antioxidant benefit. This is a pro-oxidant. There is no benefit long-term in consuming compounds like turmeric for antioxidant benefits. Again, it is a toxin to the body, and beyond medicinal purposes, it should not be consumed long-term. There are other ways to combat the said benefits of consuming turmeric.
The consumption of saturated fats and cholesterol for human beings is advantageous.
True. Every cell in your body is made of cholesterol. Cholesterol is essential for cell formation, cell communication, nutrient absorption, nutrient transportation. It's essential for the production of hormones, and it's essential for healing. Lack of saturated fats will lead to hormonal problems and problems generally with health and well-being. So if we look at LDL, quote unquote, the cholesterol that is touted as the bad cholesterol, the liver will release LDL particles in order to travel through the body to drop off lipid cargo in order to heal and repair your body. Now take a step back and think about that. How is this detrimental? After it's dropped off its lipid cargo, it will find its merry way back to the liver where it's recycled and sent back on its merry way. Now, if you restrict the consumption of saturated fats, for example, the liver will upregulate its production of cholesterol naturally. Now, we can artificially lower this via the consumption of phytosterols. This will lower our cholesterol because the liver will mistake these fake cholesterols for human cholesterol, and therefore it lowers production. But this is, in fact, in my opinion, one of the main causes and contributors of cardiovascular disease. And you can prove this. If you Google a condition called cytosterolemia, you will see that cytosterolemia is a genetically inherited condition in which the body cannot remove phytosterols beyond a certain capacity, which leads to a buildup of the phytosterols and early onset cardiovascular problems, heart attack, heart disease, so on and so forth. And we know this. So cytosterolemia is directly correlated with cardiac events. Yet we're told that these plant sterols are beneficial because they lower our cholesterol. Now, this is a big problem, especially when we're out in the sun, because the sun, when the UVA and UVB rays hit the skin, cholesterol goes to work, but it's unable to do so if it doesn't have any. And this is why we burn. This is what leads to things like skin cancer. But if our body has the ability to utilize human cholesterol, then we don't burn. When I was consuming seed oils and exposed to sunlight, I would burn, I would peel, and I'd become unwell. Now that I've removed the seed oils and I've increased the amount of saturated fats and cholesterol within my body, I no longer burn, which is absolutely incredible. Saturated fats and cholesterol are essential. The brain is made of saturated fats. The myelin sheath, which is how we send signals through the body, is made of cholesterol. And I would argue that the consumption of saturated fats is more beneficial than any other. And that said, if we look at the foods that are meant to be high in saturated fats, i.e. red meat, less than 2% of that product is actually saturated fats. Out of the 7% of the fat that's in there, the predominant is still non-saturated fats. Yet the saturated fats are the demons. They're the ones that become demonized within society. Now, what happens is when cholesterol is released and it drops off its lipid cargo, it travels back to the liver. But if it comes across some damage, then it will heal and repair that damage. But these particles can become oxidized. and glycated, oxidized via seed oils or vegetable oils, and they can become glycated via the overconsumption of carbohydrate or glucose. Because all carbs break down into sugar, by the way. This increases glucose in the blood because carbs is sugar, and this causes glycation. Now, think of glycation as things becoming sticky. So these cells become sticky within the body. It causes glycation and oxidative stress. Now, when it does this, it damages a receptor on the LDL particle called the ApoB100 receptor. This receptor is the access card back to the liver for the body to recycle and send the particle back on its way. But when it's damaged, the liver can't read this particle. So now it ends up in circulation. It continues to circulate within the blood, still trying to carry out its job. And what happens eventually is it will travel into the subendothelial space where there are cells there called macrophages. Now, these macrophages have something called a scavenger receptor. This scavenger receptor recognizes the damaged LDL particle. It allows it access where the liver did not. So it opens its doors and says, come in. You're welcome. And it crams in these damaged LDL particles, and this macrophage will grow into a foam cell, and the foam cell becomes an atherosclerotic plaque. So cholesterol is part of this process, but what's caused it? Excessive carbohydrate and vegetable oils, not saturated fats.
Olive oil does not belong in human diets.
So look, olive oil is a mixed bag. And the reason I say this is that oils can become oxidized. Olive oil is healthier than vegetable oils. But if we look at oxidation rates, and in fact, there's a very good study which looks at cardiac events in groups of people who already suffer or have suffered with cardiac issues. And what they did is they split people into three groups. A group that consumed high saturated fats, like lard, the other, which was olive oil, and another, which were vegetable oils. The most people died in the vegetable oil group. Less people died in the olive oil group, but still more than in the lard group. And I think it was, I think it was lard. I may be wrong, but it was some form of saturated fat. And what this means is that olive oil becomes less oxidized than vegetable oils, but it can still become oxidized. Even omega-3s can become oxidized over time. So when we look at omega-3 supplements, for example, they can become oxidized. So most oils will oxidize over time. So olive oil is one of these answers that's sort of in between. I think it's more beneficial and healthier than vegetable oils, but it's not as healthy as our saturated fats like butter, tallow, lard, and ghee. And in fact, I would argue in order for me, I think at the bottom we've got butter, but still super healthy. Above this, we've got ghee, which is clarified butter. And then, I'd come into maybe lard potentially, although there is an argument to swap these around based on various factors. And then the top for me would be tallow. This is highly nutrient dense and ideal to cook in. If I eat out and all they have to cook in is olive oil, then I'm happy. But I don't cook in it myself. I would preference some of the saturated fats, a fat that is hard at room temperature. Personally, I don't even cook in fats themselves. I tend to cook in the fat from the meat itself. So if I'm cooking mince, there's plenty of fat in mince. If I'm cooking steak, I eat chuck steak, which is incredibly fatty. Olive oil, I don't buy it anymore. I'm not against it, but for me, because of its ability to oxidize, it will sit somewhere in the middle.
There isn't sufficient amounts of vitamin C in animal products.
Fallacy. So when we done testing on vitamin C, there's an asterisk next to vitamin C, and this is because it was presumed to be zero, which means that until recently they never tested. They just assumed that there was no vitamin C in animal proteins. Let's take a step back and look at citrus fruits. Very high in vitamin C. Do you know what's higher in vitamin C than citrus fruits? Kale. Kale contains more vitamin C per 100 grams than even citrus fruits. Yet, our ability to absorb most of that vitamin C is negated by another compound found within the kale called flavonoids. Flavonoids directly inhibit the body's ability to utilize the vitamin C found within. So even though kale contains lots of vitamin C, our bodies can't access it. Also, when you cook the kale, this vitamin C is diminished by a considerable amount, making even less available for a bioavailability or the availability for the body to absorb and utilize. Vitamin C is used via a number of transporters in the body, but one of the transporters is a transporter called GLUT4. And this is a shared transporter that is shared with glucose. So because two of these compounds are competing for absorption through one transporter, the more glucose that we consume, i.e. carbohydrate, because again, just to reiterate, carbohydrate we consume in the diet breaks down into glucose. When we got more glucose in circulation, this competes for the absorption of vitamin C. Therefore, our requirement for vitamin C goes up. So this is why people on a carb lifestyle are looking for more vitamin C. Now, let's turn this around the other way. If we reduce the amount of glucose in our diet, our requirement for dietary vitamin C decreases. And in fact, it decreases so much that the amount found in red meat is more than enough, not just to sustain life, but to allow life to thrive. So I've been ketogenic and carnivore for well over a decade. Much of this, I've eaten nothing but animal proteins. I'm still yet to suffer with scurvy. Now, to put this into perspective, an average 12-ounce steak will contain around 12 milligrams of highly bioavailable vitamin C. Organ meats like beef liver, they contain 24 to 25 milligrams per 100 grams, which is way more than we need. I'm not saying that you need to consume beef liver or lamb liver every day, but a little slither, this much, every few days will supply the body with all of the vitamin C that it requires.
Thank you very much. Clearing up all these statements that I find a lot of people are still confused about. I think this isn't common knowledge at all. So I'm hoping that everybody's reaped a lot of benefits from this.
Brilliant. And thank you, Lee. Absolute pleasure as always, my friend. Thank you.
No worries. You bet.